Welcome to the Cardinal, News of Virginia, a podcast from Cardinal News. We are a nonprofit news outlet covering Southwest and Southside Virginia at cardinalnews.org. This podcast is sponsored by 5 Points Creative, a full-service, award-winning marketing firm serving clients all over the U.S. from their headquarters in Roanoke, Virginia. I'm Dutchie Jessee, and I am with Lisa Rowan, who is our education reporter. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're talking today about Sweet Briar College and a new admissions policy. So what's the policy, Lisa?
Sweet Briar College, if you're not familiar with it already, is a really small all-women's college. It's about a half hour north of Lynchburg. It is in a really rural area. It's beautiful at Sweet Briar. But Sweet Briar has a long tradition of educating women, and the definition of what it means to be a woman has been changing. So at Sweet Briar, they have put in place a new admissions policy for anyone who comes in fall 2025 or later. You have to mark on your admissions forms that you are a woman. You use she, her pronouns. You are a female. This is a little different from their previous admissions policy, where if you marked that you were non-binary or you were transgender, you were also eligible for admission. So now those people are not eligible for admission. You have to say, I am a woman, I live consistently as a woman, I consider myself only a woman, and that's who they will be letting into the college starting in the fall.
I want to know, how did the school announce this change, or did it?
They really didn't. And this is what has caused a lot of shock in the Sweet Briar community, their students, their alumni, is that this didn't get announced at all, really. What happened is this policy got changed by the board of directors back in May. It didn't get put on the Sweet Briar website until early August.
Okay, so 2024?
2024. And so it was a little note that was changed in 2 places on the website. Students found out about this because they were looking up things, checking things that they needed from the website, and said, hey, this is different from what it used to be, started asking questions. And that was when the administration of the college had to address questions about why this policy was changing and why nobody had been told.
So how did the word get out among students? What's happened?
It was really word of mouth.
Yeah.
There was a lot of social media. There's a lot of use of different apps like WhatsApp, GroupMe, Snapchat. There's one called Yik Yak that is all anonymous chatting that students use a lot. And so they all sort of learned among themselves. And as the semester started later in August, there was a lot of discussion between the students themselves and trying to talk to the administration as well to say, why did this happen? And this is such a change from what we thought we knew Sweet Briar was, which was a welcoming place for people who are exploring their gender identity, people who are somewhere in the LGBTQ community. It had a reputation for being a really welcoming and inclusive place. And students were raising the point of, why this? Why now? We feel like we've been betrayed.
Tell me what you've done in covering this. Did you go to campus? Have you talked with students, faculty? Let's start with sort of what you've been doing to cover this.
So the media started catching on to this in sort of mid-August when the students were starting to speak out about it. But it has taken me a long time to get students to talk to me about the situation. A lot of students at Sweet Briar are really worried that if the administration finds out that they spoke about this, that they could get kicked off campus, something could happen with their financial aid, they might not be able to graduate. So it's been a really long process of me trying to get in touch with students and talk with them, because the university itself, the college has not wanted to talk about this with the media. They've only done, I believe, one article with the Associated Press back in the fall where they commented officially. And when I asked questions in the fall, they pointed me to that article. And when I asked more questions in January, they offered me an interview and then took it away and wouldn't really answer most of my questions. So my information has primarily come from students and from faculty, and those people have not... They've not been willing to put their names, for the most part, to their experiences because they are afraid for their status as students or their status as faculty. So I've spent months. I visited Sweet Briar twice in October and November. I was invited by students to come and speak with them. And they just told me what it's like to be someone who might be transgender or non-binary or just be a lesbian or even a straight person on campus at Sweet Briar and what it feels like right now. And this is a very small college campus in a very isolated area. So if you're on this campus, it was the thing that was hanging over everyone's head all during fall semester of why this policy, what does it mean for us? And I will say that for current students, this policy does not apply to them. If you're already enrolled at Sweet Briar and you identify as non-binary or transgender, you are quote unquote safe, but there's still a lot of fear happening. And so that's why I felt it was important to talk to current Sweet Briar students about, how they're feeling about this.
Who did you, and use names if you can, but you've just told me that some people, it's hard to get a source on this that wants to be named. So can you tell me some specifics of what you've been told by students?
Yeah, so I talked to one transgender student. Their name is Trin, and Trin told me about finding out about this policy and immediately going to someone she trusted. And I'm sorry, I just misgendered Trin. Trin now uses they, them pronouns.
Okay.
And Trin immediately went to someone in residence life that they trusted to be like, am I safe? Does this apply to me? And the person in residence life was able to calm them down and say, you are fine. But Trin has had to navigate over the semester what it means for someone like them to be at a campus where they felt welcome in their first year of being a student. And all of a sudden, in their second year with this policy change, they feel like they're suddenly not welcome anymore. And so they're hearing mixed messages. There's the messages on campus that say, we're going to be welcoming to students who are here. This doesn't apply to anyone who's already on campus. But at the same time, by making this new policy, people like Trin feel like, well, how can you really say that you welcome me and that you care for me if you don't care for other people who are like me? So Trin had to figure out whether they wanted to stay at Sweet Briar. And it's a tough decision for a lot of students because if you get far enough into your college career, it's hard to transfer without having to retake sometimes whole semesters worth of classes. It's expensive and it's time consuming. Trin ultimately decided that they want to stay at Sweet Briar. Part of it is because they really love the major that they're in, studying archaeology and history. It's a combination that isn't available at a lot of schools in Virginia. So they really love that learning experience at Sweet Briar. And the other part is that they want to stay to show that they're there, to provide visibility to other students who may come on campus and to other people who may be questioning their gender or may be trans but not out to the campus community, just being there and showing that they are not backing down, they're not giving up. That's something that over the course of last semester became really important to them.
Have you spoken or found anyone who has expressed that they support the new admissions policy, and if so, why?
For this particular article, I was focusing primarily on the perspectives of students who were tied to or were a part of the LGBTQ community. But we know from some student-led surveys that were done sort of how much of the campus supports. And so there were two things that came out in the fall. So there was a letter that was sort of an open letter that any student could sign. About 45% of the student body, which is about 430 people, nearly half asked the board to rescind the policy and adopt a more inclusive one. Around the same time, there was also an anonymous survey that the Student Government Association conducted among students, and about half the student body responded. Of those students, nearly 70% strongly opposed the new policy, and 15% of respondents supported the new policy. And the rest fell somewhere in the middle. You could say that you somewhat supported or somewhat objected to it. And then of those people who responded to that survey, a quarter of freshmen and over a third of sophomores said they were thinking about transferring because of this. So there are some people on campus who say, yes, this is a women's college. I want everyone here to identify as a woman and, be a part of that community. But it seems like the majority of students are saying, well, a lot of other women's colleges allow non-binary and transgender students. So why can't we? Why do we have to make this change? Let people live their lives. And they're also saying that, the people who are here who are transgender or non-binary, they grew up raised as women. And so they have that whole body of knowledge, that makes them a worthy contributor to this community at Sweet Briar, with their past experience and their current experience. So, there are people who fall on both sides of this. But it's the students in the LGBTQ community are the ones who feel that they've been violated by this change. And so that's where I focused my reporting, because their experience is the one that's going to change over the next few years.
What about the faculty? Have you heard any reactions from the faculty at Sweet Briar? And did you say the student body, by the way, is a little over 400 total?
Yes, they have about 430 students total over 4 years.
Okay, so what are you hearing from the faculty, if anything?
Faculty are frustrated. A lot of them are looking for a way out, whether it's through early retirement, whether it's through finding a place elsewhere to work. Part of it is they're frustrated because they've been instructed not to talk about the policy, but students are bringing it up in their classes, and so they can't really share how they're feeling about it, but they're trying to listen. The faculty senate at Sweet Briar did submit a resolution back in August. They called on the board of directors to take back the admissions policy, and they suggested a revised policy that was similar to what the students asked for, to be more inclusive. The faculty approved that resolution 48-4 with one abstention. So the vast majority of the faculty supported this request to the university to take back the policy and rethink it.
It's a private school.
Yes.
Have you been able to determine how it was even passed to begin with? Like the genesis of it. When did it become, you said it passed in May of last year, of 2024, and then wasn't really sort of announced in August, obviously not drawn attention to it.
Yeah.
How do you know, like, the bylaws of the board there and what it has to go through? And you can't FOIA anything, right? You can't ask for records because it's not a government, it's not government funded. And
Yeah, it's really tough when you have a private college and you want to look more into their finances or how they work, because you can't just submit a public records request. If the college is not willing to share the information with you, you are kind of up creek, and you have to. This is why I've talked to so many people who are afraid to be named, because I have to sort of work around the information that I can't get. So that's been really challenging. We have what the school has said publicly about why they changed this policy. And what they've said after they were asked about it by students and alumni, they put out some statements and said that they had to change the policy because the Common App changed how they allow students to mark their gender or sex on their application. The Common App is a platform where you can use one college application and send it out to multiple colleges. So it's this new online platform that's been, the Common App has existed for a long time, but it's sort of gained popularity, and there are a lot of schools that use it now for simplicity's sake. And Sweet Briar said, well, they just made changes to how students record sex and gender, and so we need to protect what our mission is as a school for women, and update our policy. That doesn't really track with what I know from looking up the policies at Common App. They changed their format on their applications in 2022 and 2023. It does not appear that they've made any very recent changes that would warrant needing to update things specifically because of new changes coming. But that is what the college has said about why the board of directors made this change. They haven't said anything about why the faculty senate wasn't let known about this, why students weren't told about this. There are also theories about why it may have actually happened. And so this is, if you read my story, this is not in the story because it's speculation, right? But I can tell you what I've heard. So there could be some political pressure. There could be very conservative members of the board of directors who were pushing for this sort of a return to traditionalism in some way at the women's college. There could be like the fear of political pressure and just sort of trying to get ahead of things and being like, all right, like we're in our corner, that's cool. There could be the issue of a donor. Colleges rely on contributions from members of the public, a lot of times alumni, members of the boards. These are people who donate to the colleges that keep them running long term. There could potentially have been a donor that said, I want to give this amount of money to the college, but only if, et cetera, et cetera. So this is speculation. This is based on things that have happened sort of other places in sort of the higher ed sphere, things that come up. But there could be things at work that we don't know about because it's a private college, and so we're not able to get that information.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you about higher ed, if Sweet Briar is an outlier here, or if you've been able to determine if this is a trend in the private school world, and what you've been able to determine as far as context. Is this something we're going to see more and more of? Have other states already dealt with it with some of their private schools or elsewhere in Virginia?
Yeah. So nationwide, there are about 30 schools that are women's colleges.
Okay.
That's way down from what it used to be in the 60s and 70s. That number has been declining as more and more women have gone to co-ed institutions, but there's still, more than 24 women's colleges. And in terms of their gender admissions policies, Sweet Briar is one of the outliers. Most of the colleges allow people who are non-binary or transgender. They have some language that is welcoming to people beyond the traditional definition of being female. In a lot of places, the only rule is you can't have been born male and attend. But it's whatever else. If you feel like you fit in here, you're welcome. And part of this is because colleges are competing for students. And so women's colleges in particular that are often very small are like, yeah, everybody come. Like, come on in. You're welcome here. There are only a few schools that don't allow transgender people on campus or non-binary people on campus and don't allow them to graduate. So for example, if I applied to Sweet Briar and was accepted as, me as a female, if I got to campus and said, I'm transgender, I want to be referred to as male, Sweet Briar would not let me graduate under this new policy. They would require me to transfer out. And there are only, I believe, 3 schools that require that. If you come to campus as female and then change your gender markers, that you have to leave. So they're really an outlier in terms of how strict they are and how limiting they are in the idea of what a women's college is.
So I know you don't have a crystal ball and we can't see what's going to happen, but as far as, I guess, official action and things like that, I mean, is it just, well, the policy is the policy, so unless the board rescinds it, but is there anyone who would have the power to force them to rescind it? Your article, I think, mentions the Attorney General being involved, but not for the normal reasons you might think. It's kind of tell us that.
Yeah, it's really sort of wild why the Attorney General is involved in this at all. And it's because Sweet Briar was founded by the will of a woman who died and had no heirs and instructed in her will, I want to set up a school for girls and women. And at that time, there was no corporations commission to set up, nonprofits and businesses. And so the General Assembly had to do it. So the General Assembly instructed for the setup of this college. And because the will has no heirs, the Attorney General's office is basically the body in charge of the will and any changes to the will over time. I know this is these are the times when I wish Dwayne Yancey was on this podcast because he knows a lot about this and he could tell you all about this.
But that's very interesting.
It's very unusual.
It's
an unusual situation for a college. And because that mission says it's a school for girls and women, the board of directors for Sweet Briar went to the Attorney General's office and said, hey, can you sign off on this and say that we're, appropriate within our restrictions? And the Attorney General came back and they had Sweet Briar and the Attorney General's office had this settlement signed in court that says, yes, this is within their powers. This aligns with their mission. And it's a legally binding agreement that says this policy is A-OK. And, it's also the fact that because it's a public, or because it is a private college, Sweet Briar is within their rights to do this. So they're within their rights. The Attorney General's office has backed them up with a binding agreement. It's not like the next Attorney General could come in and undo that. So the only way this policy is going to change is if the administration and board of Sweet Briar decide they want to change it. And there are students who have told me that they are going to work towards this. You know, they want the college to see the light, so to speak, and to change this policy. But they know that it's going to be a hard road. It may not work. And even if the college changes the policy back, students still feel that they've been betrayed. You know, the line has been drawn in the sand, so to speak. So I think for the next couple of years, students at Sweet Briar are going to be figuring out how everything fits together for them, how they want to approach the administration, how they want to approach life on campus. And so even though this seems like a done deal in terms of the policy, you know, simply existing, it's going to be one to watch for several semesters.
Well, if anything new develops, if there are updates to provide us with, we look forward to your coverage on that, Lisa Rowan. And I just have to point out that sometimes a story that ends up, you know, published on our site, sometimes it represents months and months and months of work.
Yeah.
And that's part of the challenge, but also, I don't know, just the nature of journalism. So appreciate all your work in covering this for us, and all your work as our education reporter. If someone wants to get a hold of you for any reason, this story, or how should they do that? What's your email?
Yeah, my email is lisa@cardinalnews.org. And, you know, I found a lot of the people that I talked to for this story on Instagram. So if you search Lisa Rowan Cardinal on Instagram, you'll find me, and you can reach out to me there too.
That's great. Thank you so much, Lisa Rowan.
you.
And you can read her story on this and read all of our work. It's paywall free at cardinalnews.org. We want to thank you for listening to the Cardinal News of Virginia, and thanks to our sponsor, 5 Points Creative. Also want to thank Sherry Quinley and Zach Shelton for their technical support. And I'm Dutchie Jessee for Cardinal News.